Welcome to Paint Along at the Plainfield-Guilford Township Public Library. Hope you enjoy today. We're going together to paint a simple landscape painting, a seasonal landscape painting. So I hope you enjoy that. I'm going to show you step by step what I do when I'm out painting or again putting together a painting for a class or something like that. So let's get started. You'll need, first of all, some type of a canvas or board or something to actually make your painting on. So we'll let you. This one happens to be about an 8x10 cradled board. You don't have to have anything that expensive or anything, but a simple canvas board is easy. You can even paint on paper if you have a hard surface behind it. I've got some little table easels, which are great for a setup like this, but frankly, if you don't have that, a pizza box will work great, you know, for an easel. So, or you can even just do them in your lap. So I'm hoping that if you've never painted before, we can make this just as easy for you and as enjoyable as we possibly can, and give you a few little tips and tricks along the way to teach about, maybe even open your eyes to seeing art in a way that maybe you haven't seen it before. So we've got our canvas. You'll need, I'm using a paper plate as a palette. Putting on my, and this is where I'm going to be mixing my paints. And speaking of paints, I'm using some acrylic paint. So the cleanup is with water and some paper towels, so it's pretty simple. I happen to have some artist paints here that I'm using. That happens to be what I have, but quite honestly, when you are first learning about painting and mixing color, you can even go with these simple craft paints. That's how I learned to mix color, by using craft paint. So I would just encourage you to do that, especially again if you're learning to mix color. You don't need to spend a lot of cash on supplies. So craft paint will work just fine for our services. I am starting with primary colors, but I'll get more into that a little bit when we talk about color. Another thing you're going to need are brushes. Now, these are just simple craft brushes that I picked up. I do have some better painting brushes, but these work just great. I personally love to use a flat brush, and as you can see, the flat brush has a very straight edge along the top. I love the brush work that you get with a flat brush. So that's what I'll be using today. It's really helpful to have a brush that is a larger piece, so that when you're actually filling in larger shapes, it's very helpful to have something larger. And then I've got this will be the workhorse that we use today. And again, it is a flat brush, again, straight across. This size is about a 10, but because I'm working on a small canvas, I'm going to use a smaller brush. Then the other one that I'm going to need, since we are doing a landscape, especially when I'm working with trees and doing tree limbs, is a long script brush. And I don't know if you can see, but it has just a really long, thin fibers, hairs. So that will give you a nice long, and it has a nice spring to it, so that when you're doing tree limbs, it just has some nice movement to it. I also have a very, very tiny filbert brush that is really great for putting in some small details at the end. And a filbert has a rounded tip. Again, I like the brush stroke that you get with that. So I like having one of these really small ones in my kit. All right, so those are the main things that you'll need. You'll need, of course, if you're working in acrylic, you'll need water and some paper towels for cleanup. But that is, for the most part, what we're going to be using today. All right, let's get started. So to begin, I've put my paints out on my palette. I've got a blue, red, yellow, those are our primaries, and of course some white, so we can use that to tint. But before we actually set the paintbrush on the canvas or the board, whatever you're using, the first thing we're going to do is really think about what we're going to paint. And above all, we're going to create a composition. Basically, that sounds really complicated, but it's really just looking at how we're arranging the objects in the painting. The goal is for your eye to move around the painting, okay? So that's what we're going to do by using darker colors, values. Value is the light and darkness of an object. So dark things, right up against those light colors really draw your eye. So we're going to be using darks and lights to move your eye through the painting. So I've got this image here that I have of just a simple summer field. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just show you a little bit about how the objects are arranged and why this was really an interesting photo for me. And as you'll notice, I really love, and it may be a little bit hard for you to see on the video, but right here in the foreground, in this area right here, we have some flowers. Queen Anne's lace or something like that. I don't know if you can see where I'm drawing it. But as you can see, they make this really wonderful, and we are going to emphasize the darkness right here behind these flowers later in our painting. But they draw your eye into this direction. And then there's a line of darkness here where these grasses are and the creek bed is, as you can see. And this edge draws your eye this way and back to here. It brings you back to this really beautiful oval-shaped tree, but because it's a vertical, it stops your eye, and it's going to take your eye, we're going to kick back into this area behind the trees. So you can see it makes this really beautiful S shape that moves your eye through the painting. And that's what we're going to really focus on today in this painting, an S-shape composition. All right, so let's get started. Here we are. Some other things that we want to do, we want to look at shapes. But at the very beginning, we want to decide where to set our horizon line. Now, if you look at the entire painting, you can see that the horizon line here is really right in the middle of the painting. So we want to kind of avoid that. You'll have a more interesting painting if it's not divided equally in half. So because this particular scene is going to be more about the foreground and these beautiful grasses that we have here, we're going to shorten the sky just a little bit and bring the horizon line up just a little bit in our painting. So to go ahead and begin with that, I'm going to mix some red and blue together. You can see they make a really dark purple. Now on my color wheel, you can see my primary is red and blue. If I mix those together in the proper amounts, I should end up with something that looks very purple. And I did, very much so. You'd be able to notice it more if I add a touch of white. But for our purposes right now, I want it nice and dark. Because I'm using it to sketch on the painting. So again, I'm going to shorten this horizon, and I'm bringing my horizon line up just a little bit, about 3/4 of the way. And then I'm also going to extend it kind of over here behind where those trees are, just so I don't forget about it. All right then. So again, now that I've got this kind of some paint mixed here that I can do some sketching with, we're going to sketch in some shapes, the shapes that we see in our painting. So again, I've already pointed out that there is this really wonderful kind of a triangle here that we have of white flowers in the foreground. So I'm going to sketch that in. And again, we're kind of like that, kind of right there. Then we have this beautiful triangle coming up. This shape. Okay, we have a tree. The tree is kind of a bit of an oval shape. You can see that, so I'm putting that oval shape in here. Again, that serves as a really nice vertical. Back in the background, you can see that there are some other trees that are way back here in the distance, and I'm just going to kind of block those in a little bit. All right. The next shape that I really see, you'll notice here where we have our darkest dark, and we have a really beautiful sunlit small shrub, and I want to make sure that we put those in there as well. It has a little bit, let's look at the shape here. It has kind of a rectangle shape, and then of course the oval, the circular shape that you see here of that shrub. So I'm just going to put that in there. Now let's look at the shapes of the trees that we have here back in the back. You'll see here that there is kind of, again, a circle. This tree is lit very brightly, in very bright green, a very, very warm green. And then the other trees are more in shadow. That means that they're going to have more blue in them. They're very cool. So we're going to work on that. So I'm just kind of drawing in some shapes of those darker trees. And then we have some really darks back here in this corner. Kind of a, as you can see, it's kind of actually down here. Down in that creek bank. And then back in this area, it's also very dark. And as you can see, we have some interesting shapes here with these darks. Okay. Now, I'm going to remove this paper that I drew on so that I can take a fresh look at this. All right. And so, now I'm going to start working on putting in the local color. And what I mean by local color is that we're going to focus again on shapes, but we're going to take a look at the color that we actually see on the photograph here. So I'm going to start with the sky because I really like working from the back or the top of the painting and working my way down into the foreground. The things that are farther away are going to be maybe not as clear, and the further away items are, for instance, these trees that are really far in the background, they're going to be more blued and gray, depending on the atmosphere of the day and sunlight. But we're going to, that will help us to create some atmospheric perspective. So the things that are far away are going to be more gray, more blurred, and less in focus than the items that we have here in the foreground. So let's do that now. So as I'm mixing, I want to do a very simple sky blue. So to get that, of course, I'm going to use a little tiny touch of blue, and then I want to use white. Now, that works pretty well, but quite honestly, there's so much green in this that I'm going to take just the tiniest touch of yellow and add that, so that we move kind of in the direction of a teal. Okay, getting a little bit of that teal. And I think I've even got a little of my red in there from that purple, which was already on my brush, but that's okay. All right, so I've got this sky blue now. So I'm just going to kind of work that into my painting. Just filling in the shapes. You can see very quickly that that's pretty much a it's pretty much a square. So let me come around here. All right. And already the sky has come alive on my painting. So with these trees, I also want to make sure that I put some areas, especially these really dark shapes. They're very dark and very heavy. So I'm just going to add a little bit here and there of these sky shapes. All right, that's good enough for the moment. Now you can see that this particular oval tree is very, very airy. So I'm going to put some of that in there as well. We can always go back and do some changing. Okay. All right then. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit more of mixing that blue and some of that purple that we had earlier. There we are. Pulling some of that purple in there, and I'm going to do these trees that are off in the distance. And I'm just going to want this to be a little bit darker value than the sky. The sky is pretty light, and we may go back in and lighten the sky after a bit. There we go. So the ones that are furthest away are going to be more blue. Got that. And the ones that are more near are going to have a little green in them. And what that actually means is they have a little yellow in them in reality. So let's mix a little yellow into that. Blue and a little yellow. Again, if you mix blue, a little blue and yellow, you're going to end up with something that leans toward green. And as you can see, I already had purple there. So this is going to be about perfect. So let's just take that green color, and we're just going to work that into our landscape as well, where those trees are just a little bit closer. All right. So far, we're doing all right. So now I'm going to start working my way forward with the fields. So again, adding more green. This painting has a lot of green in it, and that's the thing about summer. If you go out painting or getting photographs, you're going to see a lot of green. So, what we're going to do with this painting is we're going to use cool greens that have a lot of blue and warm greens that have more red and yellow in them. And that way we'll get enough of a mix that hopefully will come up with a painting that's kind of interesting. So I hope that's what we get today. All right then. So still working on the shapes and putting in local color. I'm going to start working on this very large tree mass. And again, I'm working on the fields. So to get that, I'm going to mix, to get those beautiful greens, I'm just going to do a basic green with yellow and blue. Now, this particular green has a lot of blue in it, so it's a deeper, darker, more of an evergreen color. But that's great because that's what I intend to use in some of these areas. So I'm just going to kind of work that in, lightening some of that. And I want to have a light touch because the truth is I really do want some of that darker value purple kind of peeking through. Just kind of coloring in. Again, making some interesting shapes. So I've got more of a middle green. And you can see that has kind of equal parts of yellow and blue in it. So I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to it. And again, it's very far away, so I'm going to take just a touch of white. It softens it, the tint of the white just softens it. And again, it just kind of softens it. It just makes it more pleasing, I think, tone. So I'm just going to kind of lay that back in the background. There are a couple of spots over here that we may come back and do some more of that as well. All right then, now, I think it needs to be a little bit more of a middle tone green, so let's do that. Let's pull that in there. There we are. Great. All right. Really quickly while I'm at it, we're looking at this oval tree, and as you can see, it's what I want to point out to you is the tree, the light is coming from this direction, from our right. So this side of the tree is very light. It's more of this kind of a green, whereas the part down here in shadow, again, light coming from this direction, from the right, this area is this much darker green. So we're going to reflect that. And if you have trouble seeing that sometimes, there's a great little tool that you can create. Take a little piece of cardboard and punch a hole in the center of it. And so even if you're out in the field and looking, close your eye and take a look at the tone that you're seeing. But even on a photograph, you can tell a real difference. You can see the difference between this dark green tone and this really light, this area where the light is hitting. It's much more yellow. So again, that's just a great little tool when you're starting out. And even if you've been painting for a while and you're having trouble really figuring out the color that you want to make an item. All right, so let's do that now. We can see this part is darker. So over on my tree down here, I'm going to pull in some of these darker shapes. Again, this is in shadow. And then over here, I'm going to hit that with more yellow. More yellow. It has a lot of yellow in it, just again because the light is hitting it. So let's do that. Just going to kind of just put that shape of that oval tree there. While I've got that yellow on my brush, I'm going to do the same thing over here where I see a bright spot right in here where the light is hitting it. Again, more interesting shapes. There are areas back in this area where we've got a light green that's hitting, the light is hitting those trees. Again, that just adds an interest. Doing the same here. All right, so I'm going back into my purple because I see this really beautiful little area of a ditch over here on the edge. And again, that helps lead your eye into the painting as well. So we want everything in all of the points of the painting of moving towards this S shape. So as you can see, it's going to form just kind of, again, I'm going to need purple. My acrylics are dry, so I'm going to need to mix more purple. Adding some red and blue, making that beautiful purple. Again, if you really want to just have purple on your palette, you certainly can, but there really is great value in learning how to mix your own colors from primaries. You can see I've got just a really lovely purple here just by adding a little white and red and blue. So there you are. All right then. So I'm going to add a little bit right down in here in this area. Kind of, there's like a little ditch, a little break where the grasses are taller. Putting that in. And now I'm seeing lots of shadows down in this area. I'm going to use that kind of purple down in this area as well. This is a creek bank, and so it's very cool. We want the feeling of it being very cool down in that creek bank. So that's what we're going to do that with some of this purple. I see some other areas right here that I'm just going to, again, just give your eye a direction, just add a little interest and texture here, again, with some of this purple underneath where those grasses are. All right. Okay, so I think we're ready to mix some more green. Here we go. So we've already got that deep, dark green here. I'm gonna wipe off some of that purple. I've got quite a bit on there, so I'm gonna get a paper towel and wipe some more of it off. All right, here we go. So we're going to start mixing some of these brighter greens. And to get that, I'm going to mix blue and yellow, of course. That's going to give us a nice middle tone green. All right, then I'm going to add more yellow. Now, if you'll look at this green that we have right in this shape, the main part of the field, the biggest portion, the biggest shape that we have here, this is a really light green. And we get that by adding our blue and yellow. But you can see it's next to the yellow, so it has a lot more yellow in it than blue. So again, that's going to give us this really bright yellowish green. So I'm going to add more yellow. And then I'm going to add just a touch of white to soften it. There we are. That's kind of the direction I wanted to go. You can see it's kind of much the same tone that we have going there on that field. All right, so let's go ahead and just put that shape in there. Kind of going over that purple. It's a little transparent, so that's perfectly fine. But you can see it's just kind of peeking through. Now you might remember that I wanted to define this space a little bit to kind of give us more of that zigzag. So again, I'm going to take some of that purple, kind of do the same bit in there. Great. Okay. That's kind of what I wanted to do. Just kind of filling in, we're just filling in those shapes. Now, you might notice down here in the foreground, instead of green, we've got something that looks a little more like orange. So we're going to jump over there and we're going to fill in this lower portion where the flowers are by mixing yellow and red. But as you can see, we're mixing yellow and red. It has a lot more yellow in it than anything else. So this is the point where we're going to add a lot of yellow. I'm going to wipe off my brush a little bit because it has a lot of green in it. So, yellow with just a little hint of red. It's taking us in the direction of orange. And now we're going to need to add more yellow. Love that. And now we're going to tone it down a little bit again with the white, just to kind of soften it. That's much more what we have in mind for this. There we are. That's about what we want. All right. So again, just going to kind of fill in some of these more golden areas. Okay. See some other areas here that are kind of hit by that light. All right. So we kind of put in all of our local color now, and we've got at least the shapes that we have for our painting on the board. So we're going to go back now, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the details that we're going to have to bring this painting to life. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to start to work on trees. Now, I told you earlier a little bit about using that liner brush. As you can see, that it has just really this great kind of spring, has kind of a great spring to it, and we're going to use that. It'll help us get those tree trunks and put in some other details on the trees. So to do that, first of all, with the tree trunk, they're dark in this painting because the light is so bright. That causes the more vertical planes to go very dark. Again, just the way a bright sunshine that is directly overhead or even a little to the right, going to make those trees look very, very dark. So we're going to go back to that beautiful purple that we created earlier, the really dark purple. We're going to mix red and blue. And now we're going to make it even go a little darker towards black by adding yellow. And I know that doesn't make sense. Yellow is a light color. It would make it lighter. But no, in reality, by adding a little bit yellow, it's going to take it more in the direction of black. Especially if I make sure I have the right amount of blue in there. There we are. That's kind of what I'm wanting. So because if you use all three of the primary colors, you should get black or something very, very close to it. And I don't use black on the palette because I think it looks flat. But if you mix your own dark color like black, if you get it very much like black, your eye will read it as being black or really very dark. So, so that's what I really tend to do with landscape painting. If you want it to go in more of a gray direction, of course, you could always add a little white, which we're not going to do that today, at least not for this moment. I'm adding just the tiniest bit of water because I want it a little thin as I work on these tree trunks. So here we go. So I'm just going to kind of press at the base of the tree trunk, and then I'm going to pull upwards and just wiggle the brush a little bit as I create the branches of the tree. So we'll do a little bit of that. We're going to press and just pull it up. And then looking at where the branches are, you can see they kind of move off into other directions. Can't really see all of them. This is rather thick, so I'm adding a little more water just to thin it out a little bit. And then we're going to, again, press and pull it up and do a little wiggling. All right, very good for the moment. All right, I'm gonna, wherever I see any tree trunks, I see some here in these other branches as well. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to add some to help me to kind of define some of these trees over here as well. Again, starting at the base, little tree trunks. And as you look into the woods, you're going to see trunks here and there. And that's kind of what I'm going for. We're just going to, you don't want to put them, you don't want to put your tree trunks just individually, like step by step by step. You don't want three in a row. I've done that you know, a lot of times when I was first starting. So you want to kind of avoid putting them evenly spaced. They're going to be much more interesting if you vary the spaces between the trees and the tree trunks and that kind of thing. So that makes a little bit more interesting painting in the final product. All right. Going to do a little bit more of that now down here in this shrub that we did. Going to come back in a little bit. All right, we've got some really beautiful verticals in some of these weeds. I'm going to go ahead and just put those in. And I'm putting them in dark because I can go in a little while with some green and lighten them up. But I like the vertical. There's so much going on and it's very horizontal, so I kind of like that vertical look to it. I'm seeing some other areas back in here. You can't quite make it out, but there is a creek here because it's all in shadow. So I'm kind of putting that in there as well. All right. I'm going to go in now with some of that dark green that I had, where I've got all of these wonderful beautiful florals that we have here. Going in with some dark green. Again, it's summertime, so you're going to see a lot of plants here in the foreground. And I'm just doing this pretty quickly and not really, again, just some little more impressionist. Okay, it's starting to come together a little bit now. All right, so we've got a really nice mix of darks and lights. Now, I've kind of put some of that in. I'm going to go back in now with this little detail brush that I showed you before. It's a filbert, I think a number 4, very, very small. And I'm going to start to put in the final details of this painting. As you can see, we've been working on having your eye move around the painting. We worked on putting shapes into the painting of local color. We looked at values, which is with the lightness or the darkness of an item. And then we also looked at warm and cool with these grasses and some of these, the foliage. So now I'm going to add some detail with this. Now I think our sky is honestly just a little too dark. So I'm going to go in with a little bit more sky color, and I'm going to start to work on that. So again, to get that sky color, we used a little bit of blue, just a touch of blue. Added quite a bit of white. I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of red and yellow. I just picked up some of that orange that I had up there earlier. That's going to warm it up a bit. And again, this is a very pale, very, very pale blue. All right, there you are. I don't know if you can see that very well, but again, very pale blue. So let's just see what happens when we put this color in and just to lighten it up. You can see now, one thing about your sky, as you get closer to the horizon line, the sky naturally looks, because the atmosphere, there's less atmosphere, it's going to take on kind of a pink tone often, or sometimes yellow. So you'll want to, you can put that in your painting as well. So we can usually add just the tiniest touch of pink or yellow right there at that horizon line. And that will also help to define those trees that we have back there in the background. There you are. See how that kind of defines the shape. Going back in and adding that. You see it really brightens it up to lighten up our sky a little bit. Okay. Very good. There we are. And we don't have to do the whole thing. There's an area up here where it's a little more blue, and that works. Okay, so we've done that. Now let's start brightening up that foreground. All right. So, again, lots of green. We're using a lot of green today in this scene. So I'm going to be mixing that really bright, light green, adding, again, taking my blue with a lot of yellow, again, like this color wheel, as you can see. Here's our blue, but we're adding, and we keep adding lots and lots of yellow to it. So just going to add a little bit of white to that. Let's see what we get. Now we can always just test it by putting it on the painting and see if we like it. If we don't like it, we can always just cover it over, wipe it off, scrape it off. Lots of scraping is done as you're learning to paint. So here we go. Let's just add that and see what we think. So as you can see, I think it kind of pops. It might be just a little too yellow, quite honestly. So I'm going to add a little more green to it. That little tiny bit of that yellow there won't matter at all. Just adding a little bit here and there. I really love the yellow with all the purple that we've put in here. Again, they're opposites on the color wheel, so when you put any two colors that are opposites on the color wheel, they vibrate. Visually, they vibrate. So I'm really liking the yellow that I'm using here. It's kind of a mustard yellow, really, or at least that's how it's reading on our painting. And I'm really liking that with the purple that we've got in the background. So if there's something you like about your painting, hang on to it. Don't cover it up. Again, another thing that I've learned. Here we go. All right, so you can see we're just kind of filling in, brightening it up a little bit here and there. All right. I liked that orange that we have. I'm going to, again, add a little bit more of that and just brighten it up a little bit and give it a little more punch. So to get that orange, remember it was really bright, so we're adding a lot of yellow to our red. And then we put a little hint of white in there. So just going to have a few areas that I kind of punch up there with that. And don't be afraid to kind of add it in other areas as well. That kind of gives it does actually add unity to the painting when you see, your eye won't really notice that color when you place it in another place, but visually it will be there and you'll pick it up even though you won't really realize that that's what you like. So we're just going to add a little bit of that orange here and there. Now the sun is coming this direction, so I'm going to punch up some of that brightness again. It's a pretty warm, sunny day in our photo, so I want to kind of reflect that a little bit more. I'm going to hit these areas of the tree, not too much white and too much yellow. So let's take it down a notch. There we are. That might be a little bit better. There we are. That's more of what I had in mind. All right, adding some of that punch to some of these other areas. Now I'm going to go in and put some detail in these trees a bit. Using that dark, beautiful dark green that we had. Just going to come in and just add some areas of leaves. This is a pretty solid mass, but one thing that I can do to kind of break this up is, so you can see we have this field back here in the background where it's just really light, kind of a very pale green yellow. Put a little highlight here, right through there. We could also come over here behind this tree. In fact, you know what? That's very green. I kind of like that orange that I've got going there. I'm going to, I think, move it over and change it to orange. I think that will be a little bit more effective just because there's so much green going on. And right now, you know, if wheat is, this time of the year when the wheat is being harvested, you know, you get those beautiful wheat fields. That's what we're going to do. I think the wheat field in the background is going to look a lot better with those oranges that we have in this natural area. So I'm just going to, again, take this in the direction more of an orange. Yeah, I like that much better. That really makes it pop. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to continue a few spots of this orange behind these trees because what I want to do is make it look like there's a wheat field behind these trees. So I'm just, again, my horizon line is here, so I'm just going to come in right there and maybe put a little dot right there on either side of that trunk. And then maybe here, and then here. And that kind of gives, that one is a little bright. I'm going to tone that down. Okay, and that kind of gives the impression that you're looking through those trees. All right, let's take a little bit of that green and kind of soften that. That was kind of there. And again, a little bit of that purple and just soften it. Okay. We're getting there. One more thing that I want to do is we've got some flowers here in the foreground on this painting, so I'm just going to put some wildflowers down in there. It looks as if they're white, but if I put just plain white on this painting, it's just going to really, it will be just too much visually. It's just going to be blaring almost. So I'm going to tone down this white. Usually you can tone it down maybe with a little yellow, or I might even take some of that gray that I have. And let's just see what that looks like. I've got a little gray and a little yellow here. Now, when we put flowers in, we're not going to paint individual flowers, but what we're going to do is make it look kind of like a drift. So to do that, we're just going to paint just kind of a few here and there. And then here and there, some little, let's see. And then especially as flowers are further away, the ones back here are going to really look more like a little bit of a line. And I don't want to do too many. I want to have the indication of flowers being there, but not having them really in my face or making it really too sweet. So let's do that. I'm just, again, adding some back here in the background as drifts. And just a few here and there. Okay. I think that just about does it for today. That's, there we are. So, yeah, I can't really see anything now that, any glaring errors or anything that I want to change. But again, for just a really quick little sketch, I hope, again, take a look. And this is what we came up with today, a summer field. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you had fun with it, and I hope you'll come back again.